Miss Kay, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me.
This movie is incredible. We're talking about The Blind. It comes out September the 28th. First off, Miss Kay, great job. Thanks for allowing your story to be told. It's incredible, and I cried during the movie. Just incredible.
We did too.
You did too.
We showed it to the family. We all cried.
There's a dramatic scene in the movie where you and the kids are kicked out by Mr. Phil. You leave the house, middle of the night, raining. Did you have any hope in those days and weeks following that moment that you guys would reconcile?
Well, what I tell is this. I had a moment that, I just thought, I just don't know. I fought for 10 years. How long do I have to fight? Because my grandmother told me when I was a child, I stayed with her a lot, most of my time. And when we talked about marriage, she always say, well, you're going to have to fight for your marriage. And I thought that was so silly. I thought, why would anybody have to fight for their marriage? I said, no, I'm going to be married and be happily ever after, like they always say in the books, which is not true. And my grandmother, she never gave up on telling me. Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine, Miss Kay.
But I want to tell you, when I really had my lowest moment, I just felt like that maybe, I said, I'm prayed, and it's been 10 years, and I've stayed with him. I've been faithful. I've lived for my marriage to go, for my kids to be brought up with us as their mom and dad. I mean, I just couldn't understand. I guess I was trying to make God come in my time, not his time. And what happened was, it's just one night I just thought I was beginning to really lose hope. And, when Phil put us out, that was a humbling moment, a very humbling moment. And the boys were confused. They cried. I cried. And then we settled in our other place, which was temporary. I knew that. I knew we wouldn't stay there. I just knew in my heart it wasn't going to end, but it ended for when he put us out. So the boys would say, Mama, is Daddy coming? Is Daddy coming? And I'd say, we're just going to pray for him. We're going to pray for him. And I said, but we don't want him like he is, because the devil has a hold of him. And I would even say, the devil is who's controlling your dad right now. And that's why he acts bad. He's a good man, but he needs God, and he needs the devil out of his life. And our boys would just pray for him every night, every night. And then, when he came to my work, I saw his truck out there, and my girlfriend, she was like, oh no, Phil's going to come up here and kill somebody. No, he wasn't. When I walked out there, I looked at him and he was crying. And I never saw that man cry, ever. And what he did was, he looked at me and he said, I can't eat, I can't drink, I don't want to keep living like this. And I said, but the problem lies with you, Phil. It's not us. And he said, well, let me talk to that preacher that came to see me at the beer joint. I only want to talk to him. I said, I'll get him. So that night, he was there at my work, followed me to our apartment, and the preacher came over and they talked. And Phil said, I might not trust what you say. And the preacher said, Phil, if I'd been hanging around who you were hanging around, I wouldn't trust anybody either. And he said, but I'm not saying it. God's word's going to tell you. Don't trust me. I'm a man. But this Bible, you trust it. And it took 2 nights to get Phil to see. And then on the second night, we had ran to the store and we were coming right back. They left a note on the door at our apartment. Said, hurry, come to the church right now. That's Phil. And we went to the church. We were at the back of the auditorium, and it was lit up. at the baptistry. And we heard that Phil say he was going to make Jesus the Lord of his life, and that he was sorry for all he had done. And he was baptized. And my little boys, I looked down, 3 of them, there's tears just running down their eyes. And Jason looked up and said, I hope he won't cuss if he comes to church, because we'll be embarrassed. And I said, Jason, we have to teach him how to talk. Yeah. He doesn't know, but he will. So and it was when we began again.
Amen. I had one more question about the pre-conversion time, because there's a scene in the movie. There's a scene in the movie in which your character, or the lady who portrays you, I mean, you consider taking your own life. Right. I'm curious, how serious were you? I mean, was it a...
Yes. Here's how I would describe it, because I wouldn't hardly say it in the words. For me, the way I felt that night, I want to go to sleep. I just want to go to sleep. I just want to go to sleep and be at peace, because I felt like there was so much turmoil with Phil, and so much, of seeing the bad in him, and so much of the kids waiting. And so that's what I thought. I just want to go to sleep. And that would be the closest. I didn't say I wanted to take my own life. I said I want to go to sleep and just sleep, as if I wouldn't wake up, but I really felt like I would, and then everything would be okay. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
And that night, when Alan said, Mama, outside of my door, he said, Mama, don't cry anymore. God's going to take care of us. You know how old he was? 9 years old. Mm. And that's what he said.
Powerful. Were friends urging you to just move on with your life and to forget him? Yes.
Everybody. I was on an island by myself.
Mm. Did you seriously consider that, or did you just...
Well, see, I was...
Your grandma?
I was raised up with my grandmother.
Yeah.
And she was always teaching me about marriage, about everything, even as a little girl growing up. And she would always say, you fight for your marriage and you stay married. It's a vow to God. And whatever you do, you don't mention the D word, which was divorce. So I always remembered that. It's so funny how you remember certain things and other things you don't. I'm glad I remembered that. And it meant a lot to me, her saying it to me like she did. So I fought for it.
Describe his transformation after that conversion. Was it dramatic? Was it gradual in his behavior? I'm just curious what he was like, before and after.
Well, I'll say this. It is a learning process. I knew his heart was right. I knew he had Jesus. But then I knew it was a growing period, because he didn't know how to act as a Christian. And he would say things inappropriate. And he would be sorry, but it was just every time. And he held the song book and he said, I don't think I can sing. And I said, yes, you can. It's just not rock and roll. And, he learned it. And he became, in every group he could get in, he would tell them, put me in a small group. I want to learn. Put me in a small group. When somebody goes to Bible study, I want to go. He was that much in wanting to learn how to change. He knew he wasn't living like a Christian.
You're describing sanctification there. It seems like that's a powerful lesson for Christians, to be patient with new believers, because that's what Mr. Phil was. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And somebody asked me in another interview, well, how did you and the kids make it right before, he did change? And I said, well, when he put us out and we came to a little town 20 miles away from where we were, when we were in the church there, we learned quickly we had some pink buses, that all the children would go on and they would pick up children to bring to church. And my boys got so involved, they won a prize every week for bringing the most kids to church. And I was with them. And so we tried so hard to fill our minds with that and doing God's work. And then I think, like I say, when Phil finally saw that this life he was in was no good, it was leading down the road to death. I mean, he had major wrecks that he should have been killed. He wasn't. And I think he just finally saw it crumble. And that's when, you know, he did come back. And like I say, I met him on the parking lot at my work and let him come over where he talked to the preacher. And it took 2 nights to get him converted, but he finally was. And then when those boys saw him baptized, they were just like, I think that was the happiest time in our life. And that little bitty apartment, Phil couldn't even fit in the kitchen hardly, but he did. And we, you know, I tell people this, I fought for that for 10 years. Don't give up at the first fight. Don't give up at the 10th fight. Please, there's so much help you can get now. And back then, I didn't know who to call. I didn't know a counselor. I didn't have the money to pay a bunch of people to help me. I would just ask people at church to help me. Pray for me and just help me live cheaply and, you know, do things like that. But I knew, I just never gave up that he would. And his sister had predicted he would never give up Jesus. Excuse me.
That's powerful. That is so powerful. Miss Kay, I only have one more question for you. I know it's late in the day when we're talking right now and it's hot.
Well, I just had another interview.
That's all right.
A long one.
I'm curious. What do you want moviegoers to be thinking about? How do you want this to impact people? What do you want people to learn from your story and Mr. Phil's story?
Well, I want them to learn that God's way is the only way. You need to have triangle, wife, husband, God in that marriage. And also you need to have patience. That's what I had. You've got to believe that God can do all things. And it might not come tomorrow. It might not come 5 years from now. It might not come till like me 10 years. And if he doesn't, you still hold on to him. You still hold on to him. And my boys to this day, we've had no divorces in our family. They're all married. They all have children. I have grandchildren with children. I have a lot of people. And all, nearly 50 of us, no divorces. They're happy and they all are Christians. And, you know, Phil would say, I can't believe that we almost lost this. And now look what we have. And he tells me on a regular basis, I'm so glad you stayed with me. I'm so glad you fought for our marriage. So that's what I want people to know.
That's powerful. I do have one more question for you, Ms. Kay. It seems like this movie is really geared toward non-Christians because it's gritty and it shows despair, but it also shows hope. So I'm just curious, are you really wanting, I guess, Christians to bring their maybe unbelief? Yeah. I
do. And there's Christians who are also there in situations like my marriage was in. I want them to be there too. And of course, all non-Christians, I think it would be great to show it's the better life. And the fact that you can have hope. Mm-hmm. And I vowed to God that even if Phil never came back, I would raise my children in him and we would make it regardless. But I prayed and prayed that he would touch Phil's heart. And he did. Amen.
We've been speaking to Miss Kay Robertson. She's portrayed in the movie The Blind, which comes out September the 28th. It's amazing, Miss Kay. I'm hoping people go see it.
Well, thank you for having me on.
TheBlindMovie.com. Thank you so much, Miss Kay.
Thank you.